connecting. Okay, we are connected. Also, I hate the guy who came here and moved every single thing. What is going on? Why is everything out of place? What happened here? Why? Who moved everything? Um, Literally, it is all my fault, but don't let myself know. Anyways, what's up? Good morning. Here we are, it's another day. I I certainly, let's say it like this, I don't think I would want to do any other thing today. I have even something to talk about, but I don't want to. Not today, at least. I would try to keep it at a bay. That one idea, let's say, and continue with everything else that is more easier, I guess, to say, to talk about and whatnot, because the this concept of the lowest hanging fruit is always something to think a little bit about, to ponder a little bit. I believe doing the most accessible stuff right off, right out of the bat is quite boring in that sense. There is no proper flavor if you only do what you believe will do well. After all, there is always that possibility even of taking risks and whatnot. And I believe if we never even tried to accomplish something minimally beyond what is the average, something minimally more interesting than what is the always performed stuff, then nothing really changes and nothing is therefore really gained from that. So yeah, simply trying to talk a little bit and simply trying to say stuff after all, even quite paradoxically also, even if I say that talking about something which I know won't truly change that many things or will not be regarded as something amazing, even then it is quite quite a simple thing to be here compared to many other things. So yeah, um, we we're engaging rather in this manner of relaxed conversation. I prefer that today. Tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow we will do it, I guess. But anyways, also good good evening, Savannah. I am quite happy because I see that you have emotes now. I don't remember if you had before your what is it your affiliate activator, but quite a huge step in that sense. And yeah, what a very good thing. What a happy thing to be about. What a nice thing, I guess. Ah, what a very nice thing. Ah, but yeah. Very very good. Then finally, your very own emotes. And the best thing even is that they are free, so you don't need to worry about having to resubscribe to your own channel because for you at the very least they are free. But yeah, very nice. Certainly, I don't know. it rarely gets talked about, but it's one of those accomplishments which, at the end of the day, you could very well say that is a lot of steps forward, a lot of a lot of things accomplished in order to be there, and a lot of gains, quote unquote, a lot of a lot of witness to see things progressing is indeed happy. And yeah, I mean, everybody reuses stuff to some extent, certainly, or not certainly. The best example in that sense will be all of the emotes here. There is nothing original. Every single thing is a reference to another. So very easily you could say, yeah, that reusing assets and reusing concepts is indeed part of the nature of, in this case, making emotes. But I don't know. I don't. As long as the only important thing, as long as they don't break copyright or anything of the sort, there is literally no problem. But on behalf of every other thing, they are still, even if similar to the rest, capable of having their own taste based on how, yeah, of how one is capable of personalizing them. After all, that is also part of the interesting thing about having them. But yeah, yeah, very, very good. I guess very, very nice. And also, I see, I have realized I might say too many times too much, I guess, and whatnot, and probably, and similar words. I remember I have even mentioned that before. I remember I have even tried to say it, and I don't know. I haven't truly changed that much, but still being aware about it is quite an interesting thing. Being aware is quite a wonderful fact after all. It allows for change, but I don't know. I really don't know. Also, even I don't know is something that I overuse. I It is perplexing to see how much of my daily speech is composed of repeated patterns. I guess. But yeah, maybe maybe I will try to to not make so many observations in that sense if it won't change. And yeah, I do ignore it. I don't. It doesn't mean that I don't read what it says. I mean, as long as it is on chat, it is quite impossible to not read it. But I try to not acknowledge what is said. There was in no way any kind of acknowledgement. I think so. But once again, it is quite impossible to not read the message itself. After all, you need to, firstly, at the very least, say that it says no response to realize that, oh wow, this next thing I should not react to, let's say, but it simply is a part of the process, and thank you. Certainly, I guess the proper response would be certainly if I am not trying to be cute in any way and I get called cute, I might have done something very, very well in that sense. So, thank you for your compliment. I, yeah, I don't know. It is quite crazy when you see it from that perspective. That I don't know. It always is something that makes me think also, but completely. Anyways, I wouldn't lie. There are so many things always to mention that it really gets sometimes complicated to just choose one. I mean, I can always say stuff. We can always go about whatever we wish. We can always spend less time properly thinking what could be interesting to say in any way. That is quite the advantage of being here in terms of what the live streaming services offer. You can be less proactive when choosing what is the next thing that comes out of your mouth. That is something quite wonderful. It doesn't mean that it should be the nature of us in the sense of, yeah, you know what? Completely time to ignore any interesting idea and go to the most random thing. After all, I think I don't know if I have, at the very least, here in particular, complained about it, but certainly I do not like it when people can't even focus on something which can be properly considered interesting. I do not find it in any kind of way a meaningful thing to, in in a sense, do those very meaningless acts themselves. And that is why a lot of times there is this lack of proper structure because, after all, once you once you start to try and decide which things might be interesting, you find it quite surprising that there are too many things which are also interesting. Also, thank you for being here, Savannah. I am once again congratulations, I guess, on reaching affiliate. Um, I don't know. Certainly, it is yet one step in a thousand in the ladder of life. So very good. Keep looking forward to other things that will also come in life. It is it is just an event to a certain degree. I don't know. I don't want to be too cynical also. So yeah, look at peace. Let's say it like that. But yeah, continuing. The other idea is subtly you realize most of the time when you are trying to, in any degree, find something interesting, you start to realize the average person, I will say, assuming that it is performed by the average person, you will realize unavoidably which things might be considered interesting and which things might be considered in any way useful too by themselves considered. I I do not believe it is by itself bad, but what I do realize in that process is properly being forced to pick just one thing ends up being unavoidably a good choice. And not because choosing itself is also negative or pernicious, it simply is that making any kind of choice at all might as well disable you from choosing other things which could be considered also interesting. And I do not know. I believe there is this constant struggle with wishes and desires in everybody to a certain extent, because obviously some people possess the capacity to ignore a little bit more what are those calls from their own nature, let's say, and there are those who are driven by them completely. And for the average person, you find yourself in the middle, where you sometimes struggle and sometimes you have it easier because you can properly think what you want. And in that sense, it happens like here that no matter what you try, no matter what you go for, when you are dealing with so many options, for the average person, there will unavoidably be a degree of discomfort because picking just one option out of the thousands that are available, going for just one thing that could be considered meaningful out of the billion of choices that could be made in life is kind of stressful, I would say, because you need to make amends, to accept, to be capable of conciliating yourself with the idea that what you choose might as well be only one path forward towards a good thing, while you're leaving behind so many others that could be potentially also useful. But it doesn't mean, firstly, that you will have to abandon any desire to do something good, something, once again, this whole discussion is mostly about meaningfulness, about something that can be attributed to the quality of meaningfulness. It doesn't mean that you have to abandon all of them. It simply is realizing that there is a necessity for choosing because there are so many things that could be done, but at the same time that are not being performed by anyone, that you might as well be obliged to, at the very least, do something, do some one thing that is in any kind of manner useful, because it is only after seeing those results that you would want to be concerned with everything else. It never feels right to be so worried about all the possible options if there is, in the end, nothing being performed. I always find it annoying, even this whole discussion about which path might be the best from the standpoint of somebody who isn't moving forward in life at all. I, with observation, have come to quite certainly hate the concept of anxiety because it is something that in this whole scheme of fight, flight, or freeze responses, something that defaults in many people to freeze. And inaction can certainly be considered harmful. Inaction itself is the worst type of thing that could happen to anybody because the problem isn't that you are not doing one particular thing, The problem is there are always choices which you could take and things which you could try. Inaction itself refers to the moment in which nothing is truly going on. And I guess, as a little bit of a consideration, in this case, it is meaningful to say that thinking by itself, most of the time, for the average person, isn't really inaction because sadly, most people are accustomed even to what is their daily life with their daily ideas. Nothing gets truly created there. So, if you decide to take some time and observe things, if you decide to take some time and think, that is a conscious choice and that is time well spent because after all, once again, many people don't even do that, don't even give themselves the space to think, to use the most useful tool in your own hands in any kind of manner and to do something with that, even if it seems to not be the most productive activity, is by itself already meaningful enough. But that is, once again, just a tiny clarification or, yeah, something of that sort. A tiny observation to make because, after all, it could also, depending on who you are, inaction could very well be defined not simply as what is the consequence of a lack of proper action. You could rather also describe inaction as the problem of not doing anything useful for others because your proper actions should be by themselves meaningful enough not to just yourself. After all, being hedonistic in life is not a rewarding thing. Therefore, to be capable of acting in accordance to what others might like enables you to gain a plethora of tools to survive better and to make the life of others better. And that isn't, to some degree, that isn't what I would call a proper description. Because, sadly, most people are not even aware of what can be considered useful on their own existence. If we assume now that everybody is going to be somehow capable of realizing out of nowhere what could be beneficial to every single person, and if we truly believed that it was going to happen to all of us in the very moment in which you wish for it, and changing your whole way of being irreversibly so that you don't have to worry about not thinking about it. If we believe in something of that sort, if we say that it is a possibility, we are quite lying, Sarah. It is on its very nature a falsehood because most people are not even aware of what they themselves wish for their own life, for their own selfish pleasures, even. Most people are not capable of realizing what is it that they admire, what is it that they aspire to, what is it that gives them reasons to keep going. And it goes sadly back to what I mentioned before. Most normal people don't even stop to think. So it becomes more and more rare just from that perspective. But assuming that you are dealing with somebody who has never thought about said things, to force them now to act always in accordance to a fear of inaction, let's say, would be to impose one too many heavy, impossible to achieve responsibilities. Because it gets harder to describe it once you realize also that sometimes not doing something is by itself an action. Refraining from doing something or saying something is by itself an action of meaningfulness and something that can be perceived as useful because it allows you to keep going, because it lets others be, because it doesn't nullify any other possible future experience. So you can't expect everybody at every single second to realize, to find out, and to define for themselves instantly what they wish for. You can't force somebody to choose in a matter of seconds what is their driving force if, say, the person hasn't even stopped to analyze what is it that they so much observe as a properly interesting thing. And I do not know when it comes to particularly the conversations with others, how useful it can be to say that your vision needs to be shared. I, with enough conversations, I have suddenly realized persuasion, even unconsciously, happens even when there is no real need to force anything. Happens when there is no real necessity for it. Happens. Persuasion becomes part of the daily life of everybody. To a certain degree, I remember even mentioning something like that when the other day, when was it? 2 days ago, I think. When no, it wasn't 2 days. It was at the beginning of the week, I think, when Sergey said, "You are manipulating." Certainly, Manipulation itself is part of every single conversation. I need to convince you of something. Therefore, I try to make a solid enough argument that could be, in any particular way, useful, and that could, in any meaningful manner, alter the direction of your life and give it any particular structure which could be beneficial to you. That is what could be called manipulation by itself, even when I am doing it in the hopes of both of us benefiting, not just myself, not just a selfish desire. And sadly, the point was not that this happens consciously, because when it is performed and observed to be occurring because of a choice, you understand its consequences, or at the very least, you harness some more the concepts that will come after you did it, said actions, as you acted upon something. That type of manipulation is indeed better than when suddenly the origin of this one point. If you do discuss what could be called interesting for yourself, there might very well be a possibility towards getting persuaded by somebody else's vision on stuff and ideas, concepts about this world which are possessed by other people and which are, in the end, certainly declared as useful by others. It is a huge factor, and here I am simply trying to say that I believe it could even be dangerous, because if what you have defined as meaningful when entering a discussion with somebody else ends up being shown as not so useful, you have either to deal with the loss of what you before used to refer as a motivating factor and replace it by yourself, or what I would even suspect is a more common goal. You will need to sacrifice your own self, because what you are being given by someone who seemed to make a solid enough argument is better, and if you have already failed to establish what could in any way be beneficial, why not simply let the other person choose for you what might be beneficial, what might be useful or meaningful? And it always is partially a consequence of being not fully responsible. I think, sadly, it is even part of the daily life of many that when encountering these type of discussions, not only You act in the way of, I will try to go with what you are establishing to be a truly important thing because it seems I failed. But also, there is this. As I have not chosen that for me by myself, the moment in which it fails, I can blame someone else. I don't need to be held accountable if what I am proposing is not my own idea, but rather something that was given to me by another one, something that I gained as a consequence of simply existing, let's say. That's where I find problems to begin with, because certainly not only you are thinking already about when you fail, which could be by itself discussed as sadly the moment in which you realize that there is a possibility of failure, you are already starting to move towards just that one particular cliff of negative consequences and possibly bad outcomes. Even if you believe that it isn't an obligation for you, or that it is the most logical part of your own self, it unavoidably happens that just. I think that is even the problem. It isn't just because you are belittling your own self, it is more along the lines of, as it has become normalized, as it has been accepted as a part of life, you are rejecting even what could be your whole potential simply because you want to have in your hands something that could satisfy and justify having not achieved what could be called that one goal which you are aspiring towards. And I don't know, it always takes time. All of these things always require proper time. But sadly, when you are yet again forced to choose, obligated to move in any direction, you end up going for something that isn't really interesting for you. And I do not care if that meaningful act is the most important one that anybody could ever aspire to. I am not talking here about the usefulness of aiming for the most impossible to achieve dream that everybody should pursue one set of meaningful tasks and whatever. As I have said before, I am simply talking about a fulfilling one. And fulfillment can be found in 1,000 different places. There is no tag which forces you to only do what is the nicest thing. it never is about even what can be called meaningful by every single one who observes that. Tracing back, because there is something wonderful, and that is you can spend time, you can invest time in thinking. You can use that one tool to observe and to obtain conclusions for yourself about what can be then finally called interesting. I do not have any attraction towards all of those lesser things of we will use one particular definition which brings satisfaction to everyone, even if we have in the back of our mind the constant ringing sound of, yeah, other people don't even have the capacity of making sense about what I am saying. No, I just want others to realize that a choice which is taken by oneself with true desire for the well-being of everyone is already good enough. There is never anything that should force you to go for the hardest and most impossible to achieve goal. The point isn't about torturing yourself. Life itself isn't about having the worst type of it just to find yourself dead after some decades of immense struggles. It is just about the capacity to justify the skill possessed by many to make sense of what are the different choices which we take in life. And that is indeed a problem because many don't believe even they have such a possibility. Many do not realize how they can accomplish something like that by and for themselves. I totally despise the idea of you are forced to obtain meaning from others based not on the capacity to help others that we have already established. If you're only self centered, no matter which reason you find, it certainly is not enough. It certainly never will accomplish realms of full satisfaction of the existence that anybody could have. But what is minimally being given or being gained by all of those who, in any form, try to possess something meaningful or to pursue something meaningful, should never be considered an even more improbable idea in terms of the personal pursuits of different people being by themselves bad because they aren't good enough in terms of because they haven't evolved and they haven't developed themselves to reach full maturity. I am not talking about that one thing, and I am not mentioning or attributing anything to that one concept. I simply am saying if you wish for something, and if you realize that this one thing which you wish for could be of any use to others, based on that, you start to gain advantages and you start to gain different leads compared to those who don't have them at all in their lives. And this isn't about finishing a race. The meaning itself, as defined before, is usefulness, not just on your own existence. Happiness not only in your own bubble of this thing called life. It is a lot more complex than that. It always is a lot more complex than that. And many wish simply for reasons to justify not having those in life. Many can in any way believe that such a thing could never be good to pursue. But consideration of the topic at hand, analysis of what is said, the quality of thinking once again, shines a better, brighter light on all of these things than what many other conceptions of it could ever achieve. Because it is a possibility, it is a given chance that you could very well do something which is of any usage to others instead of being forced to wail over what is not even interesting for yourself. Because I think that is always the end of this concept, or the other end, let's say, in terms of even if you adopt something that is given by others to you as a justifying a reason, it never is enough. And you are always being forced to ignore the incredibly huge hole that exists in your own life about acting in regards to something that for yourself you don't wish, nor will you in any meaningful manner benefit from. And it is a possibility given to all. It is a type of action which everybody could, in any meaningful way, try to engage with, to do something nice and to do something of any kind of meaning. I do not justify, I do not make sense or try to fall in line with the accepted useless perception of you can suffer because everybody also does so. I do not believe we truly gain anything by just saying something of that sort. The benefits of realizing, at the very least, that aspiring towards something can be motivating, give enough of a reason to say that the other view in which you merely try to somehow exist in a sea of suffering, the proper retrieval of meaning from what are your actions can indeed appease all the other negative things. And this view in which life is forced to have bad sides only damages the human spirit itself. And all of this, once again, doesn't come from anywhere, because I hate the most when I have to see somebody who I, in my heart, love, go, and not because their time came, but rather because it was just another one who got convinced by a fucking lie that it is okay to not wish for things to go in any direction. What is the gain in any meaningful way to say that it is okay to not have any type of aspiration of dream. If you can't even come to hate that side of the world which is so focused on the negation of any positive outlook on what is being itself, what can be said to be your reward for doing that? You realize by observing that not only you are being harmed by it, but also all of those who you ever cared about stop wishing for good things. The premise of you can do something good and something meaningful stops applying more and more the instant in which you let completely stupid, bad observations come into play. And I do not mean that the error in something like this is something bad by itself, or that the one who finds themselves struggling with something of that sort is somehow the worst human being. The problem resides in, sadly, there are no ways for anybody to decide and to properly orient themselves towards what could be called meaningful. And the whole array of things working each on its own little space to keep on destroying the spirit can only be called and can only be seen as bad. Everything else is fine, but to accept that giving up is okay is meaningless. And also, good, 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 good evening, Danaos. Saludos desde Argentina. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. How is everything fine, I guess, so far? Everything fine. I will say it has been, besides the chaotic events that always occur, it goes well, I guess. I guess I don't know. I I guess I don't. I mean, yeah. In that sense, I get what you mean. Certainly, there is no real difference. After all, most, if not all, people came from some parts of the Mediterranean and such. So yeah, it's it is indeed very similar. Um, at the very least, well, as Spanish-speaking countries and whatnot. I think the only kind of difference, although, might be what are the Mexicans. I think so because they also have these. Mexicans possess more of an English influence on their accents than the rest of Spanish people due to how closely related they are to the English origins themselves. But yeah, most of their places and even inside of Mexico still have mixtures of that type of genetics and whatnot, so it doesn't fully change or modify stuff that much still. You can always, let's say, hear a little bit in terms of accents, you can always realize a little bit how influenced by other things they are. And yeah. Just like Argentina, or well, South America in general, you have a lot of influences by the Mediterranean people, and that already marks a huge influence in that. I guess I don't know. I don't like to personally think about it because it is, let's say, one of the few losses, but that is more about the general world. Sadly, the American continent in general, as a whole, doesn't possess that much of a rich culture in any way compared to other places, and not because there isn't culture. Sadly, you have every single place has culture, but here, yeah, kind of as you say, there are a lot of previous influences, but all of those things end up getting lost and getting replaced. I do not mean to say something along the lines of globalization is bad. I like to be interconnected. To a certain extent, to say that globalization would be bad is to say that being here is bad, because it would literally be impossible to share something like this will exist in any other manner. Globalization allows for such expressions and for such moments of encounters between people, and that is amazing. But the problem is the cultures themselves can't properly safe keep what are their traditions, what are their origins, what are their myths, legends, and stories. What made them be once. I don't know even half of the old tales that make up the culture that is around me. I don't even know if we are truly influenced by that many, which could be traced in any way. And that is, I think, so horrible after all. It always is related to this idea of In order to try and understand the future, you need to understand the past. And I like other places in this case. That is why I bring something like that up. Something like the Greeks minimally have some ways of observing their history. Whereas in here, you find yourself in a convoluted mess of events which are barely related to one another by the thinnest of the lines of they all happened in the same place in quote unquote closely related times. Yeah, you can ask, you can always ask. But there is no problem if you ask. But I don't know, I believe at the very least that even if traditions themselves are being lost, most people are not really even aware of how necessary they are. So sadly, it doesn't become that much of a true problem like what it is for those who observe how so many things are being influenced. As an individual, do you self identify more um, over there? No, 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 no. I think if I had to be honest, if I had to be honest, I believe it is quite a preponderant move to believe that because you have pieces of other cultures, you truly form part of them. I am not American, as in from the USA, related to the USA, just because we share the same fast food culture also. I am by default South American, an Argentinian guy. It would be a lie to say, oh yeah, I highly find myself related to my ancestors. I didn't even meet them, and I would be simply trying to evade what is my surroundings if I say, do you know what? I find myself more represented by somebody who I never met, from a place in which I had never been. And not even because we think alike, simply because they have these traditions, which I can barely say I understand, but which I find more satisfying than whatever I have here. I might not like, on a personal level, things like football that much, or concepts like probably asado. I am not a fan of them, but what I am going to say, oh yeah, you know what? I am more fulfilled to other things. No, I think in that sense, if I had to say, yeah, that is kind of harder. That is kind of harder to properly answer. Let's say like this. The proper evolution of the culture ended up leading to a more overall, based on European standards, civilized existence. Therefore, I cannot avoid to say that probably I am closer to Spanish traditions than what I am right now to Charruan traditions. After all, if there was something amazing about the indigenous culture around here, it was the possibility of being so much interconnected with the nature itself. Whereas, once again, we live in cities. If you introduce a charruan to the concept of a city full of skyscrapers and buildings which are 10-story highs and immense shopping places, they would berate you for spending so many resources on unnecessary stuff. I cannot associate that, but with something more along the lines of the Spanish tradition, of the, once again, European tradition, Gothic tradition, if I had to give it a proper classification of, wow, we are going to build something big, which looks good and which looks amazing because it occupies a lot of space. And we are going to say that this serves a particular function. I see it from that side. I do not think I am even closely related to the Charron ways of being. Once again, I guess there are always those things which have been conserved. I cannot say, but thanks to all of those ideas that once again came from that people of understanding how important something like nature itself is, and having proper respect for the whole world around you, to not be so much of a consumer guy that would spend everything he has on things which only damage the rest of what is his surroundings. But that's where it ends. I mean, can you really even say that something like mate is part of a particular tradition? It is like tea. You can't say that tea is part of any tradition. You can't say that at this point in the time in the whole world, something like drinking Coca-Cola is, wow, only done by English people, by Americans, by X culture. It doesn't happen like that. Let me see. If I told you that you can keep all the progressive ideas of the Spanish culture, cities, the values, the religion, but change your language from Spanish to Charoan, will you accept? I mean, from a simply logical standpoint, I think I think it will work in the very same direction as if I told you something like, will you change to Latin? I think it will be a bad idea from a logical standpoint. Simply to change language doesn't really change it that much, you know? And it can even be negative because certainly not that many people talk it nowadays. So you end up being isolated in a culture that has been already replaced and abandoned. You know, it is indeed quite quite sad. But the language itself won't probably influence that much, just just that. Well, yeah. I understand. I understand. I mean, also, partially, I don't even know when, but at some point, the whole Mediterranean side of Europe got, I wouldn't say conquered, simply visited by more Central Asian countries with their whole system of beliefs and such. So certainly there had been a lot of influences there. Even if even if you were to speak the original language, you will still be in a barren land modified by a lot of things, sadly, that are in no way modifiable themselves by just one guy, let's say, in terms of, wow, I can truly perceive how good it is for me to speak a different language. It is the very same thing here, sadly. I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. It is that side of negativity which doesn't really bring that many advantages. The silent different achievements that have been obtained by different cultures over others are always a disappointment because almost never they propose something wonderful for the people. I do not care about having a skyscraper in my city. I do not want one. I do not personally benefit from having one. There is even observed information about how when your visual landscape gets invaded more and more by completely dead architecture, mentally you're changed. I do not care about that. I would have pretty much preferred to remain in a simple state of, and we can live in harmony with the rest of the nature. We can understand and appreciate that there is something in nature which is beneficial to everybody and which is useful to have. But I can't simply keep myself angrily screaming here about what was lost. I have the possibility as an individual to think for myself, and I can try at the very least to establish a communication between what was the past and what is the future. What I learned from observing what came before, and at the very least trying to act in a way in which I find things to come into mutual agreements which are beneficial for everybody who wish to have them. I do not win if I get angry. I win when I change things in a meaningful way. That's the game, I think so. And let me see. Indigenous language cannot only be existing in the nature, they can be urban languages as well. Yeah, certainly. Certainly. I mean, let's say like this. If the whole proposition was you replace the whole culture, or not culture, the whole from the South American or American in general, from the American continent itself, from every single place which speaks Spanish, if you replace that with their indigenous languages, will that be beneficial or not? Certainly that would increase a little bit more the appreciation itself for their different cultures, but it will unavoidably be changed into a different language over time. you know? Because there is an incredibly noticeable recurrent theme with globalization, and that is the easier it is to communicate between one another, the easier it is to establish different type of relationships. Therefore, the more you can establish one common language, the more you can say then that it is possible to achieve something like the so desired peace that everybody wants. That is why, maybe, if we lived in a different reality, let's say like this, it could happen that because every single place had their own indigenous language, something along the lines of Esperanto wouldn't sound as crazy as it did based on how many hard to master tongues there would be around the world. Based on that, you could say that it is beneficial based on that, but we don't, we haven't survived that whole transition. We live in something different. We live once again in a world in which the tongues themselves were modified. No, no, no. I do it. That is why it is a redeem. I personally have to do it every single time it gets redeemed. I don't have a soundboard. I don't know. Maybe even if I had a soundboard, I will probably not make it one of the keys. After all, there are more meaningful things to having a soundboard than a simple. But yeah, it was me all along doing that sound. Ah, okay, okay, okay. Good luck. Save your points. There is nothing better than to save your points. But anyways, I guess that's basically. It is always crazy to consider all of those things after all. I don't know, I mean, to put tradition itself to talk with the rest of the world is always something weird. But yeah, also thank you as always for being here. Have a good one then, house. It is always nice to talk with you. I can also say, I don't know. I mean, it always is weird, I guess, to have those observations after all. Yeah, I cannot say, but that sadly we have lost that capacity. We have lost those so useful practices. Not that many people even wish to think about those things. If there is anybody being harmed, why would I need to worry about that? I might not even have the capacity of changing that, so I don't need to worry about how the world is being affected by something that, in the end, I also comply to. Is it really meaningful for me to act in any good manner if it doesn't change the rest of the things? I don't know if what I am saying in that sense is truly meaningful for anybody in any way. I do not know if what I am accomplishing by saying what I do is valuable. I simply have my own opinion and I simply need to keep my own opinion as always to myself. That is easier to do. That is always easier to do and that is always the simpler path. It's, I guess, connecting what I said before with what I am saying now. It is always easier, and it is less meaningful to consider so many times what affects others without realizing that you yourself might as well be also affected by that. So you don't need in any way to worry, nor you need in any particular way to be affected by that, and to find yourself immersed or interested in any of those things. After all, if the world isn't part of what you deal with, if the world isn't part of what you experience, if only your tiny bubble of existence is what occupies your mind, why will the rest of the universe be of a concern to you? And that is, I guess, always the present experience, the present enjoyment of that, of how accessible it has become for everybody to be selfish in that way. And I don't know, I hate when somebody calls me selfish, but they are not even close to being wrong when they say something along those lines. I do not even wish to put myself in the shoes of somebody else who suffers. If I could not, I will not even think about it. I will give up everything that I have right now if it would mean that I don't have to even for 1 second more be aware of such a nature of things. I completely hate that side of life, but that is sadly not the reality in which we live. There is no manner in which you can say that what happens outside has nothing to do with you. And that's the problem of continuing in a very same manner like before, saying that there is no need to have any meaningful thing existing around you. There are a lot of things which you can disregard, but meaning itself, what is good for your existence, is in no way something that you can discard as if it didn't matter in any way. And I think that is the loss that we suffer constantly, that everybody finds themselves to be affected from, that you don't need to care for others, by others, of others. You don't need anything like that. And you believe you are going to be happy somehow? I don't know, I guess. I guess I'm simply angry sometimes with those things. Observing all of that is tiresome. And there are always, as I said before, there are always other lessons to take from that. It is the possibilities that get enabled on somebody who observes those things that matter, not the previous errors. I love those who came before me, but I am sorry I cannot help what happened before. I have no way of modifying what came before me. I cannot change history in that way. I can only act in accordance with the future, and I can only believe that what I am doing is meaningful enough to be noticed by the rest. Everybody can only do something like that if they have big enough hope, but to only dwell in the problems that are offered by life to everybody, it doesn't feel like a win or like a real achievement, I guess. It doesn't enable anything more, really. But yeah, I don't know. I guess words, as always. A lot of words, an incredibly huge degree of words, is what I have to say. After all, I don't, I don't really know. But let me let me at this because I know it feels like a defeat and I don't like to say it like that. I don't find it interesting in the least to say it like that. I know it sounds incredibly crazy to say, no, yeah. Even if I say constantly that I don't know, I do know. I am completely aware, and I am fully, more than what I would have ever wished for, capable of recognizing that indeed what I say sometimes in that sense is meaningful. And I know that saying what is bad in that sense becomes a necessity, becomes somehow nobody else is willing to point the problem that affects everybody. And not because, oh wow, I am a hero. No, 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 no. Everybody has that capacity. And everybody has, if you so willing to call it like that, if you are willing to go to that extent, they have the necessity to do it. Because what I know is that I haven't seen that many people take that responsibility by themselves on their hands. And that is what I fear, that no one else might try to change anything in that way. And what I see, what I experience is slowly, every single day, things get better in that same sense. Even if I have to act like somehow they aren't, or I have to say things like, oh yeah, I am not so sure if what I said makes sense. I am completely aware of what I say. I am fully, I haven't been closer to what is being conscious than when I am here. If I say that I don't get it, it's just because I feel bad saying that, oh yeah. And what I said just before came from a place of complete conviction. It feels fucking hate the world in which saying something like that is accepted as bad. That you can't believe that you found something good and that you shouldn't even try to share it because out of nowhere everybody's forced to see. I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's it. Now for real. Nothing else to add. nothing else to really say this time around. Thank you, as always. Thank you. Thank you for every single thing. Tomorrow, probably a less negative stream, perhaps. Maybe. We will see. Um, I mean, it certainly will feel meaningless to not say it. Be happy. That is the only thing I care about. Be happy. I do not care if you are here tomorrow or not. Be happy. Do what makes you happy. That is the only important thing. After all, that is the only meaningful thing. And the good thing about it is also that you can be happy when you do something good and something meaningful itself. It is an endless loop in which the meaningful becomes the creator of happiness, and the happiness is found in doing something meaningful. It is in the pursuit of a goal and in the belief of a dream that man can justify a lot of other things which are horrible by nature. That is why I say so many times, be happy. I fear saying too many things always, but simply know that. Be happy. Thank you.